I went straight into my master's from UNC Charlotte. I was given a wonderful financial offer from Georgetown for their master's program here in linguistics. I'm currently in the MLC, which is the Master's in Language and Communication. So I'm on the non-MS track, which means I have a little bit more flexibility in what type of courses I choose. That's housed within the like interactional sociolinguistics concentration within the department. And so I get to play around a lot more than the MS students, which I find personally very, fulfilling. And I get to actually have more of a professional focus with my courses as well than the MS students, which is a very unique thing about Georgetown's kind of linguistics space, because Georgetown has, I would say, a more practical approach to how to integrate linguistics and similar skills that I learned in the English department in my concentration into actual like real world settings, as opposed to just like academic spaces. I am like Dr. Miller said, I've been working at the same time I've been doing my master's, which has not been the easiest. I say that fully transparently. However, I've worn a lot of different hats. And so I work full-time equivalent and have since I started my graduate degree. However, I haven't been kind of housed within one company. I've worn a whole bunch of different consulting hats with different companies. And so I like to joke that I like being in places that you typically don't see English majors, just to prove that we belong there. And so I say that's a little hobby of mine, because it always throws people off whenever I tell them my background. And then that I'm several tiers higher than them in the hierarchy of the business. So I am with one hat, which is a little bit more straightforward. I work with an education consulting firm where I help them kind of unpack and help students with identity forward writing for their college admissions process, where they guide students. And with that, I'm very transparent with my students that the research that I do is primarily in identity construction and how we utilize language. And so I personally am not the biggest fan of writing, because I feel like it's a much slower medium of communication for me. I really like working with other people's writing to make sure that it's like representative of their identity, their path forward, and to kind of help with like the cohesion of who they are with like within the university context of like the different spaces that they're applying. And so this year I'm kind of stepping out of that with this upcoming application cycle, just because I have a couple of other opportunities lined up. However, I do have a really great relationship with that CEO of that company, and she's, welcome. I have the open offer to send in referrals as they're expanding like the team. So if that's of interest to anyone, happy to talk about that more in detail and to potentially send in a referral. And then the next hat that I wear, which is a little bit more, unusual, I would say, is I work as like a market research analyst with like a linguistic consulting company, specifically in the healthcare space. So I typically specialize in more like neurological disorders, chronic illnesses, and like mental health concerns. And so I just wrapped up a very interesting project on chronic kidney disorder and, opioid use disorder. And then that's been interesting. I have to say that one is, I feel a lot less aligned with my English skill sets, but I do have to work with a lot of qualitative data. So I'm reading a lot. And I'm having to look at the nuance of how people are using, different types of expressions. And so I'm in an interesting space where I'm not looking at what people have written, but I'm looking at versions of what they've said within like a textual capacity, and then kind of unpacking it. And so I think one really fun thing about qualitative research, which I think really builds off of skills that you learn regardless of the English concentration that you do at Charlotte, is being able to kind of like zoom into like the granular aspects of like what we kind of embed into language, like within like text, and then or like within our words that then get kind of transcribed into text, and then also have a bigger picture view of like what is happening between that kind of granular aspect of our writing all the way down to like variations in our punctuation to how that ties to like larger scale ideological and like societal structures in spaces as important as like our health, like our day-to-day health. And so I've gotten a lot of cool like kind of experience in that space of also understanding how language-oriented technology can actually really help improve people's healthcare experiences. And so I really enjoy working with kind of minority populations or with like geriatric patient cases to kind of understand how we can fill in gaps where there shouldn't be for people who really need to depend on the quality of their healthcare. Last one that I promise I will stop rambling on with this monologue, which is I like saving for last because it's the one that I'm stepping more into recently. And it is definitely, it will sound a lot less conventional for an English major, I would say, but I actually would advocate for more English majors to try and get into this space. Is I actually am currently working with a Fortune 10 tech company as a conversational designer in a way. So I work as like a quality assurance lead for a team of about 200 content creators. And I am essentially helping train and revise the policy around a conversational generative AI model similar to that of ChatGPT. And so in that space, I essentially, the reason why, like, there's actually, I think, this like really big misconception in the general population that like tech spaces are only meant for people with like a computer science background or are meant for people who have like engineering skills. Where I have to say, to Elaine's point, I do say this fully candidly of like, engineers don't know how to communicate. Like coders don't know how to actually do normal day things besides crunch numbers into formulas. And then there's the so what aspect of it. So I feel like I'm in my professional spaces a little less polite to those types of people because I don't think they know how to communicate. And so in that space, I actually find it very rewarding because I get to work with a lot of different type of like, in the specific sector of the project that I work on, I specifically work on training new hires and help them kind of understand the client's guidelines and their policies in terms of like neutrality guidelines, legal concerns, and then I have a particular focus in safety policy and like biased content to kind of understand how do we kind of match every individual interaction and make sure that they're aligned with those larger scale policies, but then also advocate for where policies don't properly encompass specific types of topics or edge cases. If you're looking at any type of like tech oriented in like industry, like that's typically the term that we don't know how to handle this. That's kind of the space I like to be in because I think it really pushes boundaries. And so I get to use I actually manage, most of the people that I manage are actually people from a more creative background. So a lot of them have English degrees. A lot of them are currently working on graduate programs and or are 40, 50 years old with a background in theater or a background in, screenwriting, playwriting. And so one thing where I've had to very actively integrate my English degree experience into a seemingly non-English degree space is to actually kind of connect with people who have a very strong creative background and help them understand and translate their skill sets into the tech space to help them understand how they can do their jobs the most efficiently and actually kind of fight through that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I have a humanities degree. Like I don't deserve to be earning X amount of money in this tech space where I'm like, actually, we're the ones who make this entire place run. So let's cut that and just be, embrace our potential. So I'm going to hop off my soapbox now. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. I am 3.5 weeks out from finishing my master's degree, which I'm incredibly excited for. And with that, after that, I will be doing this. I'm doing it full time, but I'll be, transitioning to only be kind of working in that space. And then hopefully into a salaried position where I'm not just doing things hourly. But anyway, very happy to be here. A huge advocate for English degrees in places that people don't take the time to think were the potential of.